Boris Johnson has apologised for attending a social event during the height of the country's COVID-19 lockdown. He told MPs in Parliament that while he was there, he believed the gathering was a work event and that he only attended for 25 minutes. While the Prime Minister said he takes responsibility for the event, he maintains the party was technically within government guidance.
I want to apologise. I know that millions of people across this country have made extraordinary sacrifices over the last 18 months. I know the anguish that they have been through, unable to mourn their relatives, unable to live their lives as they want or to do the things they love. And I know the rage they feel with me and with the government I lead when they think that in Downing Street itself the rules are not being properly followed by the people who make the rules.
But the Prime Minister's answers over his attendance at the party were met with disbelief and anger by opposition MPs. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer said Johnson's excuses were ridiculous and were offensive to the public, calling for him to step down.
Well, there we have it. After months of deceit and deception, the pathetic spectacle of a man who's run out of road. His defence that he didn't realise he was at a party. It is so ridiculous that it's actually offensive to the British public. He's finally been forced to admit what everyone knew, that when the whole country was locked down, he was hosting boozy parties in Downing Street. Yes. Is he now going to do the decent thing and resign?
Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Victoria Smith, who's outside Downing Street for us. Victoria, the Prime Minister has finally admitted that he was at the party. But is his apology too little too late?
Evening, Roo. Well, just 2 days ago, if you remember, the Prime Minister was refusing to answer questions about whether he'd been at this so-called party or not. And now we have not only that, we have an apology, an admission that he was there. He says he takes full responsibility for the gathering. He admits he should have brought his people back inside 10 Downing Street. And he says he regrets what's happened, but he is still sticking to this defence that he considered it to be a work event. We wait to hear from this inquiry by the senior civil servant, Sue Gray, whether she thinks that's the case. But certainly in the House this afternoon, there were fierce calls for his resignation. In fact, he faced 8 calls to resign at Prime Minister's questions today. And it's not just in the House, it's out among the public in the UK. There are some furious reactions from people who'd perhaps stuck to the rules back in May 2020, who were unable to visit loved ones who may have died since then. We've heard from one woman, Hannah Brady, who runs a COVID-19 bereaved family support group. She said that, in fact, her father died just a few days before this so-called party took place and that his death certificate was being signed on the day of this so-called party. And she went on to say that she actually met with Boris Johnson here at Downing Street, in the garden behind 10 Downing Street, and he looked her in the eye, she says, and said that he had done all he could for people like her father. So what does he do now? Does he stick to his guns? Does he resign? He could potentially face a vote of no confidence in the coming days or weeks if enough MPs demand that. He could resign, although it looks as if he's going to stick to his guns and wait for the inquiry to make its decision. Or he could try and stick it out. He could try and steer the public away from this issue back towards COVID, the vaccination programme, or perhaps the cost of living issue, which will be the next big hurdle for the Prime Minister to overcome.
Boris Johnson's approval ratings are at an all-time low, but it's the support of his party that he genuinely needs to see this through. What are Tory MPs saying?
Yeah, that is the crucial issue. It doesn't really matter to him so much what the public thinks. It matters what his party, what his supporters think, the Tory faithful, the Tory unfaithful. So interestingly today, the 1922 committee were meeting. We hear reports that Boris Johnson actually went and informally met some of them, perhaps to see which way the wind was blowing, to garner their support or not. But this 1922 committee is really crucial to this, because they are the committee that consider any call calls for him to face a vote of no confidence. It would take 54 MPs to demand that, and the 1922 committee would look at that, as they have done with previous Prime Ministers, like Theresa May, to make a decision on whether he should face a call of no confidence. Otherwise, it looks as if he may well wait for this inquiry. We don't know yet how long it will take. It could be next week. It could be a few weeks after that. We wait to see. Meanwhile, all quiet here at number 10 tonight, and certainly no noise coming from the gardens, no parties going on behind number 10, as far as I can make out.
Thank you, Victoria. Joining me now from London is Aleister Campbell, a writer and strategist who was Director of Communications for former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair. Thank you for joining us. So Boris Johnson has finally admitted he was at the party and offered an apology. Does this go near enough to see him through this crisis?
Well, it shouldn't, because just be clear what it means, what happened today. He stood up in the House of Commons and admitted, finally, it having been dragged from him over weeks, he admitted that he broke the law, and he admitted that he was in breach of his own ministerial code. That is a resigning offence. Now, he won't resign. Boris Johnson is somebody who his entire life has made rules for others and never felt that they apply to him. He's a liar, he's a charlatan, he's somebody without a moral compass, and people were warned of that. People knew that when he was elected, and this to me is the inevitable consequence of what happens when you put in power somebody of the amorality of Boris Johnson. So certainly for me, it hasn't done enough, and I don't think he should ever have got the job, but he did. The British people elected him. But I think an awful lot of people, the feelings about Boris Johnson have turned to absolute, complete disgust and contempt. And I think a lot of people in the country now feel that.
The Prime Minister is calling on MPs to wait for the result of Sue Gray's investigation before making a judgment. And he's gambling a lot on what she'll say, surely.
Well, I know Sue Gray very well from the time when I worked in Downing Street. She's a very, very strong and professional woman. She's a very committed public servant. But I think he has put her in a completely invidious position, because for a civil servant now to be sitting in judgment, effectively, whether the Prime Minister should stay in office, that is utterly unacceptable in my view. Now, I think she'll do a good job. I think she'll probably get to the truth. But that is a very, very, very difficult position to put somebody into. I absolutely believe now that the Metropolitan Police, they should be looking into this now. They have been saying they don't have any evidence to investigate. Well, they've now got an invitation to a party at a time when their officers were going around London arresting people who were meeting each other outside in groups of more than two. I mean, it could not be clearer. And for him to pretend that he thought this was a work event, he really does seem to think that the British people are totally stupid.
Today was the first time that Sir Keir Starmer called for the Prime Minister's resignation, despite a series of scandals. Why has he waited so long?
Well, I think you've got to be very careful in calling for people's resignation, because there's always a danger when you do. And your correspondent earlier was talking about a motion of no confidence. If, for example, Labour were to put down a motion of no confidence, it might unite the Conservatives. But I think that what Keir Starmer did there it's the inevitable consequence of where we are. He does have to resign. You cannot stay in office when you have broken the law and you've broken the ministerial code so clearly. Now, as it happens, I think Johnson's broken the ministerial code many times before, because he has lied in Parliament before, and that is meant to be a resigning offence. But I think what we're seeing here, I thought Keir Starmer today was absolutely skewered Johnson. He didn't go over the top. He was very forensic. He was very fact-based. He was very calm. And Johnson did what he always does, which is sit there shaking his head and pretending that somebody's talking about a different planet, as if he's had nothing to do with what was going on. And by the way, you say he apologised. He didn't apologise, in effect. What he said was that he was very, very sorry that mistakes were made. He didn't say, I made the mistakes. And apparently he's been talking to Tory MPs tonight and telling them he hopes that they support him because he's actually standing up for other people who made the mistake. He is the Prime Minister. I've worked in Downing Street for many, many years. There is no way in the world that a senior civil servant would send out invitations to a party in the garden at the height of a pandemic when at the same time in the building there is a cabinet minister doing a press conference telling the country they can't go out. There's no way that happens without the Prime Minister giving the go-ahead. Absolutely no way. And if it is happening inside, it means he has no control and no authority. So either way, I just think eventually, look, he's a dead man walking now. It actually might suit the Labour Party for him to just sort of, limp on. But I go back to my basic point. The guy is a liar and a charlatan. He should never have been near serious public office ever. And we're now reaping the consequences of the fact that happened.